Okay, so this is a video we chose to talk about for our group, and it's from a girl named Travel Gretel, who's from the Netherlands, and she's basically leading us on a virtual tour of Benin and like some of the places that you should go when you're there. And we're basically going to go through the 3 minutes, minute by minute, and we're each going to talk about our own section of the video. So I'm going to start and play the first minute of our section.
I want to understand more about what happened, so we follow the route of the slaves, starting at one of the forts. This Portuguese fort, or the Fort of St. John, was used by the slave traders. Slaves were kept in chains. There was no way you could escape.
You would assume that cannons like this are here to keep the enemy out, but actually it was the other way around. If slaves who were held here on the inside tried to escape, this was the threat for them. And if a cannon was not enough to scare you off, there was also a pit with crocodiles, so you would kind of be eaten alive.
Okay, so that was my section. Hopefully you can hear it. So I was looking through the space and like analyzing the space, and I noticed a lot of like, it was very morbid when you went into the space. Like this video tour showed like a kind of small glimpse into what that place is, but it's like, I can only imagine how somber and sad it feels in there. Just like immediately when you walk in, just like knowing the history of that place and just like all of that would be very like a sad place to walk into. So I think that would affect how you go about going through the space, meaning that like if it were me going through the space, I would want to be especially like very much to make it a point to be respectful and like honoring of those people who were traded there, and just to know as much as I could possibly know about that place before I went, just to be the most informed as possible. Also, I was looking at how it was staged, and staged from the point of view of like the tour guide was like, she was only showing what she wanted to show. She wasn't showing everything. So that can kind of impact what we see. We haven't seen the whole picture of that place because she didn't show all of it. But also how the space is made up of the cannons and the alligator pit and everything like that, and the walls to keep the people out. Like that just makes it so like I said earlier, somber and sad, and makes the place feel very like fortified and like there's no way to get out. In terms of who's performing, the tour guide is definitely the most obvious performer in this situation. She's basically the only person in this section that we can see. She's the one who's leading us through and explaining the history of that place. So she's definitely what we would consider front stage. She's the she talks the most. She's the one who's, leading everyone. She's the one who's showing you what's there. In the backstage, I would consider the cameraman and also the people who work there and the residents of that place to be backstage, because you don't really see them, but they definitely play a huge part in that area. There weren't too many tourists shown in this section of the video, so it's hard to know what their identities are at, what identities are at play and what behaviors I saw, because there were really a lot. Many of the tourists, there weren't really many tourists in this particular place, which makes sense in a way because like it's not really like the typical tourist attraction type of place. I believe the target audience for this part of the video is just people who are interested in touring Africa or touring Benin in particular. And the point of it was to inform those people of what this place is, so that they can be the most respectful as possible whenever they do, if they do get to go to this building. So that's all I have for my part.
from 16th century to 19th century. That's 3 centuries.
It's easy to overlook this square, but it has a great historical importance because this is the place where actually the slave market was held for 3 centuries. So people from all over the place were brought here, and then there would be a negotiation about the price. And after that they were brought to a place a bit further where they were held for 2 weeks to see how strong they were.
Okay, so for this section of the video, I said, as for how it's staged, I said tourists are only kind of going to the key historical places in Benin and like the square and where they did the slave trading. And they're not really looking at how people actually live their lives within Benin. And for who's front stage, I said the tour guides and kind of the translators because they're working together constantly. And for backstage, I said the people of Benin. For who's performing, I said there's sort of a big divide between the tour guide and the tourists. Obviously, the tour guide has the wealth of knowledge in this situation, and the tourist is kind of acting like a student and learning from the tour guide. For the next point, I said the relationship between the tourist and the tour guide is sort of seen as social roles or character traits within the two. And once again, where the tour guide is acting like the teacher and then the tourist, the student. What do the tourists want to learn for the last point? I said specifically, the tour guide wants the tourists to understand Benin's significance in the history of slave trading whenever they go to the square and see the slave trading hub. And the next one.
Okay, Katie, you got the next part.
Okay, in Fongbe, so in Fong language, it means light not in. After buying the slaves at the market, 2 weeks before traveling, they were all brought here. They put them in that building. That building normally should contain 200 people more, at most 200, but they put 600 people in that building. They sleep one over the other, and 2/3 of that amount, 2/3 of that 600 died before the end of, because they spent 2 weeks like that without eating, without water, without no light inside the room.
If slaves survived all of these hardships, they had to walk this long road all the way to the beach. There, ships would be waiting for them to take them away.
Okay, so basically, well, a little like the native, we know this, the part was true because it's coming from a native and he's the tour guide, but that piece of land is, it's kind of like a good representation of the history of how Benin started from the low and like how it's coming up with the rise in tourism and everything. And it is important to know the history because like especially if you go it's supposed to make you feel sad and make you feel like as if like, I don't know if it's supposed to put you in the place, but it's supposed to give you a representation of how the natives before were. And a lot of people when they travel, they do like to go to museums and stuff. So this is like kind of like it's obviously not the same, but it's like a piece of history. And it's and when you go in, it's especially in the building, it's supposed to make you feel like sad. You get to see where people, like they said, 2/3 of the people died, and you get to see the statues, and the statues are very I don't know I can't think of a word for it, but it's very like emotional. Like you look at it and like you think like that really happened to people. But I also compared the site along with the trail to the water as to the ritual structure. And I'm saying that the preliminal, the separation would be while you're in the building, because you're away from all humans, like you're all like in a one place, and you like don't, like you can't be with other people, the outside world, I guess. And then the liminal, which is a transition, would be the walk to the water to get on the boats and stuff. But the because you're being incorporated back into society, kind of, it's a lot different because it's slavery and stuff. But like it's kind of the idea is you're going back to society, and then the post-liminal is the boat and like getting out of Benin and stuff, because you're being reintegrated into society as a slave, of course. But that's how I compared that. So, but yeah, the overall the site is to make you feel just like absolutely awful, like things that the people in the history had to go through. And that's important to know, because because it gives you a piece and like an idea of what these people went through and how they've really grown to be where they are now. So yeah.
And overall, I think that this video was pretty good and pretty unbiased in terms of like not just showing you the pretty places, the pretty like where all the tourist spots are, the hotels, everything like that. It's really showing you like the real history. And so I feel like this video is a good representation of what Benin is and what the history of Benin is. So yeah, that's all I have to say.